But it brings up the next question, because you bring up in your book another example of gematrias that are seemingly intellectually dishonest.
Okay.
You refer to as patchwork gematrias, quote unquote. Can you give an example of this, and what convinced you that it actually displays the brilliance of Chazal?
Okay. Good question. Good question. So there's actually two things which are very similar, two chapters in the book which are similar. One is called Patchwork Gematrias. The other one is called, which I think is more the intellectually dishonest one, is the almost the same Gematrias. Right? Like people, I think most Gematria skeptics, what bothers them is when they say, oh, the Gematria works out. Oh, it's off by one, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. You're allowed to be off. Those are the things which I think are really bothersome. So I think, again, there is a Patchwork Gematria, which is another thing, but I'd rather talk about the almost the same, because I think it talks to what most people are bothered by in this intellectually dishonest type of thing. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So almost saying Gematria is the example in Chazal. Again, all the Chazal, all the Gematrias I talk about are Gematrias of Chazals. Okay, I'm not talking about homemade Gematrias. I'm just talking about the Gematrias which the Ramban is claiming. I don't know if everyone agrees with this, but Ramban is saying they're from Masorah. So again, I'm assuming that's what I like to think about. I don't like to just think about any random whatever. There's a lot of them in Chazal, and therefore I kind of go with that. Okay, so again, so Gemara and Makos. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Many of your listeners are probably familiar with it. The Gemara Makos on 23b. It's discussing the 613 mitzvahs, and it says there's 613 mitzvahs were said to Moshe, 365 negative commandments, and 248, and the 365 negative commandments corresponding to the days of the solar year, and 248 positive commandments corresponding to the limbs of a person, which is however they broke up 248 limbs. Okay. So Rav Hamnuna says, what is the pasuk which supports this idea that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah? So he says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe morash akilas Yaakov. The Torah, Moshe commanded us the Torah. It's an inheritance to the nation, to the congregation of Yaakov, right, of the Jews. So he says, Torah in Gematria is so Gemara says, Torah Gematria is 611. Torah, right? You work it out. 611, and right, that's not 613, but he says, yeah, but Anochi, it says Torah tzivalenu Moshe. Moshe taught us Torah, but Anochi and Lo Yiyah, the first two of the 10 commandments, I am Hashem your God, and you shall not have any other gods along with me, were said by Hashem. And that's the famous thing Chazal hold, that the first two commandments, again, there's different opinions of Chazal, this Chazal is holding that the first two commandments were said by Hashem himself, or the voice that Hashem created, and the Jews heard it, piqued, and the other 611 mitzvahs were from Moshe. So it actually works out. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, the Gematria, is 611, right? So it's not 613, but it kind of works because, you do those two things. But, so this is like the closest example I had in Chazal of like one of these almost the same Gematrias, because it's kind of like, it doesn't really work, but it's kind of, you can make it work, and it's pretty good. Right, it kind of fits because he does the other two, but still, I think it rubs people wrong when it's like precedent for these gematrias that are almost the same but not quite. Yeah,
precedent. That's the word I would use.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So again, my approach, my method in approaching this type of thing is all of them is to forget the gematria for a little bit and just think about what is the Chazal trying to tell us. Okay, so we're not talking about Gematria for a little while. Okay, and we'll come back to talking about Gematria afterwards. Okay, so it's telling us about the mitzvahs and the totality of the system of the mitzvahs. It's breaking down the mitzvahs into two classes: those of positive commandments and negative commandments, right? And likening them to the days of the year, the bones of our body, right? And it's also something else which is in the Chazal is it's splitting the commandments into 611 and 2, right? There's 2 which were said by Hashem, and then there's 611 which were conveyed by Moshe, of course from Hashem, but conveyed by Moshe as the Shliach Hashem. And those 2 actually happen to be one aseh, Anochi, right? I am Hashem your God, as a positive commandment to know Hashem, and a negative commandment not to worship Avodah Zarah, not to have other gods besides me. And what I hear the in this Chazal is that it's almost like depicting, classifying all the mitzvos. It's a classification of all the mitzvos. There's two primary mitzvos that we heard from Hashem directly, and then there branches out. Under each of these two headings, there's almost like paradigms of all the mitzvos, of aseh and of los aseh, and the one aseh splits up into the two, branches out to 247 others, and the one los aseh negative branches out to 364 others. So that being the case, I thought maybe we could pursue that a little bit and pursue what is this classification? What are mitzvos about? What is the objective of mitzvos? What are mitzvos designed to do for us? And then what is the delineation of assays and los assays? And in what way is Anochi really a paradigm of, the major, the whole head of the category for the assays, and what's lo that you shouldn't have other gods, the head of the paradigm for the other los assays? Sounds good?
Great.
That's our game plan here. Okay? Okay. So what is the objective? What are mitzvahs for? So, big question. But the Ramban talks about it. It's a famous Ramban, as if whoever is not familiar with it, I'm hoping you're familiar with it, or your readers or your listeners are familiar with it, but it's classic, one of the best Rambans, in my opinion, in the Torah, which is on Shiloh HaKan, on Kan Sipor, where the sending away the mother bird, and right. So he talks about the mitzvos, and I'm going to give you like a snippet of what he says, but I highly recommend for everybody. It's in Devarim Chaf Beis Vav 22:6. It's an awesome Ramban. Just like a few Rambans would stand out of my mind, is that there's another one at the end of bow. If anyone's looking for another Ramban like that, but these are classics. So he says like this again. I have the Hebrew for me again. I'm torn between just reading in English or reading the Hebrew. To me, it's like what I like to do. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it I'm going to translate it in my head and just say it in English, because if I read it in English, it just sounds like I'm just reciting something. So I'm looking at the Hebrew and I'm just going to explain it. So I'm like talking in my own words.
Sure.
So he says like this. So you could look at it. I think I'm, as accurate to the text as I could. So it says, in each of the mitzvos, there's a reason and a benefit for man, besides for the reward that Hashem is going to give us. He says, because the purpose, the benefit of the mitzvos is not for Hashem himself, who is exalted, who's above, right? But the benefit is for man, which is to prevent him from some sort of a harm, either a bad belief or a bad character trait, or it's to teach him to remember the miracles of the wonders of the Creator, and so that he'll help him know Hashem. Okay, ... And also the mitzvahs are to remove from our hearts all bad beliefs, and to make us know the true ideas, and to allow us to cause us to remember those true ideas all the time. ... Then he says, and therefore, he says, all of the mitzvahs are for our benefit alone. And that's a pasuk in Eov. It says, if you sin, what could it do to him? If you have many sins, it can't harm him. And it says, or what from your hand is he going to take? You can't give him anything. And he says, this, the Ramban says, is accepted, it's unanimous, it's muskam b'chol dever b'seinu. It's accepted in all the words of Chazal. And we even talk about it in Ne'ilah. Like we say, if we're tzaddikim, what could we give to God? And the idea is that we can't give anything to God. Hashem created the world. He doesn't need us. He created the world for nothing. We can't help him by doing the mitzvos. But the mitzvos, he's helping us by giving us the mitzvos. He set up, it's so to speak, his will that the world will have the good, that mankind will be able to live in line with the good. And the mitzvos are, each mitzvah, the Ramban is saying, is the whole idea of Tamei mitzvos. Mitzvos are guiding us to be able to help us attain the good, that which is good for man. And he classifies, what's that?
They're tools.
They're tools, exactly. They're tools to help guide us to live a good life. And Hashem wants us to have the good. And Ramban cites, in this Ramban, he cites many psukim. You could go through this, about many psukim where it says, L'tov lach, L'tov lach, L'tov lach, in various words. The mitzvahs are for your good. It keeps saying it throughout Dvarim, especially in Dvarim, maybe elsewhere, but in Dvarim, it's always saying the mitzvahs are for your benefit. And the Ramban quotes that. He says it's accepted by everybody. And when he talks about the benefits, and again, there's the Rambam talks about this a lot also, but the Ramban, he talks about the benefits. He classifies, it seems like there's a subdivision in terms of the benefits. of, again, there's various ways to subdivide it. Okay, but I'm going to choose one specific one, which I think is relevant to this Chazal, which is assays and los assays. And like he describes, he says, it's to teach you good ideas so that you remember the miracles and you always know about Hashem and you're always thinking about Hashem. And that's what assays are about. And when it comes to, or to prevent you from a harm, whether it be a physical harm or a false belief or a bad character trait, right? So it's like assays and los assays are like split up into these two different objectives. And it's sur me'ra, v'aseh tov, right? Turn away from bad and do good. It's like kind of the two parts of our life. We have to remove ourselves from negative influences and we have to grab hold of the positive. And in general, assays are grabbing hold of positives and los assays are avoiding negatives. You with me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about Anochi and Lo Yiyeh, right? If this is the claiming here is the Chazal are kind of saying there are these two classes of mitzvos, and at the head of them, the two that we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu are Anochi and Lo Yiyeh. I am Hashem your God, and you shall not have other gods besides me. So Anochi, the Ramban, once again, he says like this. He says this mitzvah, Anochi Hashem, is a mitzvah. It's a positive mitzvah. He says it's teaching us and commanding us. This is the Ramban in Shemos Chaf Beis 22. So it says it's teaching us, commanding us that we should know and believe that there is Hashem, and He is a God for them. Namely, He exists. He is first, Kadmon. He's the first. From Him, everything emerges through His will. He's like His will. It doesn't. Okay, I don't want to go into that at depth right now, and He has the yicholas. He has the ability to do it, to do everything, right? And He is the God. He's the judge. He's the God, and therefore we're obligated to serve Him. And that's why it says, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God." Asher hotzeisicha mi'Mitzrayim, we took you out of Mitzrayim. He said, now the Ramban continues, because taking us out of Mitzrayim teaches us about Hashem's existence. And this is the Ramban at the end of Bo elaborates on this. That when I was talking about it, that's the Ramban at the end of Bo where he elaborates about this. But this is in short. He says, taking us out of Mitzrayim teaches about His existence, right? Obviously, He's doing all these miracles. He exists. And He has will that man should do certain things, live a certain life. And because through His knowledge and through His providence, He took us out of Mitzrayim. So, like, the fact that He took us out of Mitzrayim shows He exists. He's involved in the world. He wants man to live a certain type of way. And he says it also teaches about creation, because if you have eternity of the universe, Aristotle's theory of eternity of the universe, nothing could change from its nature. Everything has an eternal fixed nature. So the miracles teaches the fact that He created, that there's creation. Since He created the world, He could change the world. And it teaches about His ability, and that teaches about His unity, His yichud. And he says psak. I mean, that's why it's saying, again, each of these demands a longer discussion. But he said that's why it says Asher Tzricha, because the Yitzias Mitzrayim is that which taught us, was witness testimony to us about all the fundamental ideas of the Torah. And the Ramban is saying this in this one mitzvah. The mitzvah Anochi Hashem Elokecha is the mitzvah of knowledge of God. Knowledge of God, Asher Tzricha Mitzrayim. Study about Yitzias Mitzrayim. Study all the ideas, all the lessons that we learned from Mitzrayim. And that's this major mitzvah, the heading, the one mitzvah Hashem told us, the mitzvah say, is to know about God's existence, know about all the lessons that are derived from the Makos, from the Yitzias Mitzrayim. And in a sense, that's a paradigm of all mitzvahs, says. That all the mitzvahs are to teach us ideas, to inculcate those ideas into our lives, to help us internalize truths about God, about Torah, about His will, about the values of the Torah. For example, we take a little of an esrog at the time when we have all our agricultural success and we feel all haughty. Look at me, I'm the great farmer, I'm successful, I'm rich. And you shake it and you bring it to before Hashem, to the Mikdash or wherever, and you're saying, Hodu Hashem kitov kilom chasto. I thank Hashem that He's great and His kindness is everlasting. Ana Hashem Hoshia, Ana Hashem, please save us. So it reminds us, it takes us out of that feeling of our own greatness for our success, and it helps remind us. We give tzedakah. We feel, again, same thing. We have a lot of money, we make money, but when we give tzedakah, we recognize Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we realize the money is from Hashem. He has, there's people He wants the aniyim He wants us to support. We daven, helps us remember Hashem, that He's the one who's in charge of our needs. We can't ultimately accomplish our needs, and we have to turn to Hashem. We wear tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah, remind us not to take security in our body, in our clothing, in our homes, but we have these things remind us. Throughout all mitzvahs, let's say, in some form or other, our actions we do to bring to our mind's eye various truths of the Torah, to teach us lessons about our midos, about Hashem, in some form or other. And that's what I think it's saying, is that Anochi Hashem said, and that's the head of a category of mitzvahs aseh, of all mitzvahs they come under that. Moshe Rabbeinu elaborated on Anochi. Anochi, ultimately, all the mitzvahs you could say aseh are to bring us to recognize Hashem's existence. But it's too just to say Anochi, it doesn't work for us. We live in our world, and Sefer Chinuch says, man is moved by his actions. Just to say, here's an idea, make your whole life, build your whole life around it, it doesn't work. Maybe for some philosopher, but for us, or people, we live in the world, we need actions to direct our mind's eye towards the true ideas of the Torah. And that's what I'm saying, is all the mitzvahs, the 247 mitzvahs are elaborations in every bone of our body, every aspect of our lives should be directed towards these ideas, towards recognizing Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the idea, is like everywhere throughout the Jew's life, we always have reminders of Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Beautiful.
Okay, so that's assays. That's Mrs. Assays. Now that's Anochi, and that's all the category of positive commandments. But then you have the negative commandments, which says, Lo yelecha Elohim acher malpana, you shouldn't have any other gods besides me. So that I think also is a paradigm of Los Assays. And this is a Rambam, but it's based on the Gemara in Kedushin on 40a and the Dar on 25a. But it's the Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, V'tzkachavim Masalos 2:4. And he says, and this is, I'm sure you've heard of this before, but it's a mitzvah of Avodah Zarah. It corresponds to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. And he cites a pasuk which supports it. And it says, it teaches you that anyone who admits about Avodah Zarah is denying the whole Torah and all the Nevi'im and everything the Nevi'im commanded from Adam all the way till the end. And anybody who denies Avodah Zarah is admitting in the whole Torah and in all the Nevi'im and everything like that. Because who Ikar Kol Mitzvahs Kulam, it's the foundation of all the mitzvahs. So how is that? What does that mean? How is it that if you deny Avodah Zarah, you're accepting all the mitzvahs? There's a lot of mitzvahs. How so? And if you accept Avodah Zarah, then you're denying all the mitzvahs. Like, what does it mean? Right? What are Chazal teaching us? Why is Avodah Zarah seems to be so limited? You just bow down to an idol. What does that have to do with all the other mitzvahs in the Torah?
Because these both are like tools. It's building on the same idea. They're
Right, if
tools.
it's the paradigm, then
right,
yep. Okay.
To eradicate Avodah Zarah from the world. They're actually doing the job of eradicating.
Okay, good. So let me just elaborate a little bit on what is Avodah Zarah. Okay, what is Avodah Zarah? Where does it come from? Why are people bowing down to idols? What's the whole motivation? What's so foundational about Avodah Zarah? As I'll say, Avram Avinu had, like, I forgot, 300 Masechtas about Avodah Zarah, and we barely know it. But it was like Avram Avinu studied Avodah Zarah, and Avodah Zarah was prevalent. And like people think of it like, oh, there's Avodah Zarah nowadays, so there's nothing to talk about anymore. That's the whole Torah. The Torah is saying, the whole liquor of the Torah is Avodah Zarah. So Avodah Zarah is like a person at its core form. Is a person is like when a person's a child, we take our parents, hopefully take care of our needs. And we cry, and our mom comes and feeds us, and all that, and we kind of feel like our parents are like Superman and Superwoman, and they're there at our beck and call, and everything we want is taken care of. And we live in this naive world that everything is there for us, all our needs are there. But then when we grow up, we kind of got a rude awakening, and we realize our parents aren't really as strong as we thought they are, and we don't really have the security that we believed we had as a youth, and it's very scary. And oftentimes, what do you do about that fear? And oftentimes what people do is, this is the root of idolatry. And again, there's a lot of branches of this and other versions of it, but as man invents false gods who could cater, allay our fears and satisfy our wishes and our fantasies. And people project their fears and their wishes onto the world. And by making up these gods, and they say you just have to do all these things in order to propitiate the gods and to make the gods happy and to all that. And they delude themselves into giving themselves a feeling of security. And that's kind of the root of idolatry, is the root and the path, which Avodah Zarah, partakes of, is that man, because of our insecurities, we're looking for something. We're looking for safety, security, our wishes to be satisfied, our fears to be protected, guarded against. And that's why man is a strong desire to have this thing which you could believe in, and you make it up. And in a certain sense, you could say the essential difference between the Torah and Avodah Zarah is the Torah is about truth and embracing truth, and Avodah Zarah is rooted in your wishes and the imagination of childish,
Shortcuts.
primitive. What's that?
Shortcuts.
Yeah,
Also.
shortcuts, exactly.
Security
So
blanket.
I love this. There's a great thing my Rabbi pointed out. I think goes from him is that we say an Aleinu every day, 3 times a day, and we highlighted on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim in the Musaf, which is we say Shehem Mishtachvim Havel V'Rek Mispalim El Yoshia. They bow down to emptiness and nothingness, to a God that doesn't save them. Right? You'd think, what would we say? And we bow to a God who does save us. But that's not what it says. We bow before the King of Kings. He spread out the heavens and the foundation of the world. We don't serve God because he helps us. We serve God because he's true, because he exists and he is the foundation of the world. He happens to help us, and that's great. We're fortunate for that, and we're happy about that. But ultimately, Torah is about embracing truth. And Avodah Zarah is about looking for a God who protects us, who saves us. It's looking, because of our fears, is making up false realities to satisfy our wishes, our instincts, our desires. And that's like kind of the essence of of Torah, is to train us to view the world based upon knowledge, based upon truth, based upon what's real and what exists, ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his world, and to remove us from the false values, whether they be gods, whether they be money, whether they be pleasure, whether they be fame. There's a lot of different values, and different people look for security and for this make-believe, sense of self from a lot of things which are make-believe values and superficial values. It doesn't have to be idols. It might be Hollywood. It might be whatever the case is. It might be money. It might be Wall Street.
Whatever we make the ultimate reality in our lives, that's
exactly. And that's what the Torah, I think it means, is like not the whole Torah is a brooding of Avodah Zarah. It doesn't mean bowing to idols alone. It means the mentality of the Avodah Zarah, who is bending the world to fit his primitive wishes, as opposed to the Torah personality is bending his wishes to fit in with what's true and what's real. And in that sense, I think it's all losa says in specific, don't pursue endless, like Machalas Ilaram Sefer Kedusha, Machalas Asuros and Isurabia, the sexual and imperative restrictions are basically saying you have this feeling that pleasure is the ultimate good. And they're saying that's a false value. And through restricting our involvement in pleasures, it helps gain control over that false value. Or there are monetary restrictions. And we have this idea that getting money at all costs. And who cares about the other guy? And all the laws involving money help us rein in our sense of pursuit of money to all end. And we have limits on that. We have laws about ribis and laws about ana and usury and fraud and things like that. Or we have interpersonal relations where it's all about a popularity contest. And we have this other Avodah Zarah of everybody liking us and all that. And therefore people involved in gossip and slander and jealousy and all that. So there's all kinds of lo saseh prohibiting us from various forms of pettiness and involvement in, attacking other people. So it's like all that's, I feel, more the class of lo saseh is Avodah Zarah is like the head of all of them, all their gods. But all lo saseh, in a certain sense, are things which harm us, which embodied the mentality of the Avodah Zarah. And in that sense, I think these two mitzvahs, again, this second mitzvah, which we heard from God, is a paradigm, is the head of a category for lo saseh, for the second objective of the Torah, the sur me'ra, the remove evil, and combine the two of them. Anochi and Loya, we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there again, the aseh Anochi is the heading of every bone of our body, every aspect of our life should be directed towards knowing Hashem, and every day, 365 days of a year, every walk of life, we have to always be on guard for all the different aspects of our lives, things pulling us in all different directions, and avoiding the Avodah Zarah type of substitute in every single aspect of our lives.
This segment actually really resonated with me the most, because I always looked at that as like a strange thing, the 611 plus the 2. Mm-hmm. But the way you explained it, it really just shows like you said, the brilliance of Chazal is evident over here. And it's something that if anyone who's listening to this for the first time, this is really the theme of our podcast, to get rid of magical thinking, idolatrous thinking, superstition, and all of that, because that just fogs up our brains to seeing things clearly and understanding that what is the crux, what is the point of all this? Why are we doing mitzvot?
Right.
So
Yeah.
one of the things I go through is when let's say I'm teaching a class or I'm introducing these ideas to certain people, there's always that initial pushback being like,
Right.
what do you mean? But are you trying to say that like, I'm taking away people's teddy bear in a way?
Right.
Like, what do you mean I can't, when I just say random words on a piece of paper and I don't understand what they mean and I'm just using it as like an incantation, that doesn't actually do anything.
Right.
So I say, well, I have to explain to them. And sometimes what happens is that there's like a kind of a, shattering of their worldview. And it's very delicate because you got to give them something to pick up the pieces.
Definitely.
So anyway, I wanted to bring that in because I felt like this analysis to me, when I read this, it was so clear to me that the Chachamim were like, they weren't using this haphazardly. This is a very, very important gematria. To me, it was like, it's really like, it just shows how brilliant it is.
Right, because it's separating, it's putting into two categories, the paradigms versus the non, where everything that follows from those paradigms.
Exactly.
And you don't get to that until they don't force it through the gematria for you to see that classification. It's really well done.
Because this one is to me, the most convincing.
I see.
The other ones are still nice ideas, but this idea was just like, wow.
It's very hard to convince Benji, trust me.
Well, we haven't really discussed the gematria yet, if you noticed.
Right. Well, yeah. So I'm gonna say,
remember we put the gematria. We still have to tie it into why he's using gematria to teach this, right?
Right. Okay. So flesh out the point. Correct.
So again, this is the type of thing I'm talking about. Though don't think about, don't go to the quantity or whatever until later. So now, if you think about it like this, is that there are these two objectives of the Torah. Okay, the somer of asay tov, avoid the evil and then attach yourself to the good. Expanding on Anochi, on I am Hashem your God, and expanding on Avodah Zarah. Now, those are, like, you could say, the qualitative themes, objectives of the Torah. But how many mitzvos do you need to do that? You could imagine there being Anochi and 3 mitzvos, and positive mitzvos, and Eliyah and 7 los asayis. Or you could have imagined Anochi and 50 million mitzvos and 20 million los asayis, right? Or anywhere in between, right? There's no specific amount. So like the Torah is more than just these 2 overarching objectives, but there's a certain quantity of the mitzvahs. There are 248 assays, there are 365 los assays. And is that by design, or did Hashem just, so to speak, throw darts in however many stuck? Of course not. And now Hashem's wisdom is beyond us, and I don't think we could claim to know how we figured out the right balance, but you could see it at least in an overarching way. If there was only a few mitzvahs, it wouldn't be enough. We are creatures of habit, we are creatures of actions, and if you just had these lo yash anochi and lo yeh, and then a few assays and a few lo assays, it wouldn't be enough. We'd get stuck in the world of our nonsense that we get drawn in by. We already do, right? And it wouldn't be enough to pull us out, to remind us of Hashem, enough to help us avoid the pitfalls of Avodah Zarah in all of its terrible forms. On the same time, if there were millions of mitzvos, it would be overwhelming. We wouldn't be able to think. We wouldn't be able to live. We wouldn't be able to conduct our lives. And there's a sweet spot. There's a fine tuning. There's a balance about just how many mitzvos are necessary. And I think the Chazal are telling us, when we study mitzvos, besides for studying the qualitative beauty of the system of mitzvos, and each and every mitzvah, the ideas that we can learn from the mitzvos and see how it benefits us, there's also something to appreciate, there's the right amount of mitzvos. Hashem knows our nature. He created us. And I think that's when it's like, someone was asking me, I looked into the world and created Torah and created the world. It's like the Torah is matched up with the human personality. It's not like the Torah just slapped on at the end, some ad hoc thing. It's Hashem made the Torah and He made us, and there's the right balance, and this is the right amount of mitzvahs. Hashem fine-tuned the precise number of mitzvahs which are necessary, and by using gematria, it's directing our attention towards, don't forget that aspect of studying in the mitzvahs. There is a perfect balance in the right amount, and while I can't prove that's the right number, it rings true that it's about, too many would be overwhelming, and too few just wouldn't be quite enough.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. That is incredible. I have to digest that.